welcome you all to Coffee with Christy and crew, and Cynthia is going to be our crew today. This is normally something that we do for our closed Facebook group, which is our Ops Boss coaching clients and Be a Boss class graduates. So we have opened it up to everybody because I feel like right now during the coronavirus, we are all in the same boat and we all need as much help as we can get. So before we get started, I want you guys, if you are new to us and you don't know who we are, to write down our website, opsbosscoaching.com. We focus on all things operations. So we are super passionate. My background is 23 years as COO of one of Keller Williams' top teams. And I'm super passionate about the operations side, those of us who are the wizards behind the screen. And we will be opening up our teaching schedule again, hopefully, fingers crossed, in July. And we will have classes in Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Delaware, Kansas, Florida, Ohio, Nevada, Idaho, Texas, Michigan, Indiana, and Colorado. So if any of those are states near you, you're going to want to come and see us. We also have 2 coaching spots open. So if you're interested in that, I'll drop a link at some point in here with my Calendly, and you're welcome to schedule a call with me. And you want to check out our blog. We have some awesome operations focused blog posts. We just put one up recently about how you can use Jot forms to automate your business, ideas for cutting expenses, personal and business. And that is the end of the commercial, and I want to welcome our crew today, which is Cynthia Matheny. Cynthia is a Master Certified Behavioral Analyst. She's the creator of a class called DISC Unlocked. If you've not been to that, this will be just a little bit of taste of that, and you want to message her and get her to come to your market center. She is a coach, trainer, and speaker for her own company called The Inspired Mind, which I love. I love that name, Cynthia. She's also a realtor and has the best smile ever. And you guys are going to want to stay all the way to the end, because at the end of the presentation, she is going to give us her magic question along with a free gift. And so I'm going to welcome Cynthia. And Cynthia, you're welcome to go ahead and share your screen. Let's
all right.
pass that out ahead so we'll help this works.
Okay, awesome. I am so honored to be here, and Christy, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity. Sharing my passion around DISC has been one of the most impactful things in my entire life. So let's get this slide.
While you're getting set up, Cynthia, I'm going to pop in the other poll.
Okay. Yep.
Except, oh, you know, I can't do 2 polls at one time, apparently. There we go.
Well, we learn as we go, right?
Share the results of the first one.
Oh, wow. Oh, this is awesome.
Okay, so we have mostly Ops Bosses on here, along with good for you rainmakers who are on here. That's awesome. Those who go together, grow together. So this is fabulous. And the second poll, if I can figure it out, is going to ask you how familiar you are with DISC.
Okay, perfect. All right, can you see my screen? I don't see anybody when I share my screen. So Christy, do you see my?
See it. We're good.
Okay. Awesome.
I want you guys, as you're listening, to make sure you're using the chat box. Make sure you've got the reactions at the bottom of your screen, so you can give us a thumbs up or a yay or whatever it is that you want. And now you're on.
Okay. And for some reason, I'm not able to move to my next slide. Why is that? Okay, we'll go right here. Awesome. All right, so in the chat box, I would love for you to drop, if you do know what your style is. If you know that you lead with your D and your I, or your I and your S, put that in the chat box. Christy is going to manage that for me as we go. I am going to use my PowerPoint because that helps keep me on track. Self-awareness is key for me, and I get easily distracted. So this will help me stay on track. So drop a comment and let me know, what is your DISC style? So here are my goals for you today. I always like to ask myself the question, what is the outcome I would like to achieve? And then the second question I ask myself is, okay, great, what has to happen to achieve that outcome? So here are my goals for you today. My goals are for you to understand the overall concepts of DISC. I realize that we have a wide variety of knowledge bases here. Some of you are quite familiar with DISC. Some of you are like, yeah, DISC, what does that mean? And what are all those 4 colors for? So I'm going to give you a brief overview education. My second goal for you is to help you to understand how you can put these concepts to work for you to improve your effectiveness, both in your business relationships as well as your personal relationships. And my third goal is to help you understand how you can realign your expectations, both of yourself and of other people. One of the key turning points for me when I was learning about DISC is I had a huge aha moment one day, and that aha moment was, oh my gosh, not everyone thinks like I do. And that was huge for me because it had never truly occurred to me before that not everyone thought like I did. And so the byproduct of that was that I was super frustrated with people for a really long time because I didn't understand why they didn't think, act, and respond like I did. So now I am blessed to be able to extend grace more readily and appreciate people for how they are wired and how that brings them strength and how it also can hold them back. And I did want to let you know too, you will receive my PowerPoint slides, so you don't have to frantically take notes. Anything you see on the screen, you will receive, or Christy's going to drop a link. I'm not sure how we're doing that, but you will be able to have the slides. Any discussion that we talk about, of course, will not be on the slides, so I encourage you to take notes for there. What do you want to learn today? Drop that in the chat box as well if there's something specific. My goal is to have time at the end of our discussion for you to ask whatever questions. Christy, again, will kind of monitor those. And if she sees some repeating themes there, I will go ahead and answer those questions at the end of our time together today.
Okay,
so
awesome.
for those of you,
before you go on, Cynthia, so to answer the question, we'll send out the PowerPoint. Thank you for letting us share that following the call. And we're now starting to get some questions about what people want to learn. They want to learn how to use DISC at greater depth, how to communicate with certain types of DISC, how to talk about DISC with my team, how to frame something so people with a different DISC profile can hear it, how to recognize, I like this one, how to recognize someone else's DISC as quickly as possible so that I can apply it. We're getting lots of questions.
Okay, good.
DISC for interviewing, DISC for hiring, and then I think the rest were mostly repeats. So those are awesome.
Okay, those are great questions. With an hour's worth of time, we will get to as much of that as I can. Specifically, I have built into our time today identifying DISC in others. And one of the gifts that I will give you at the end today is a magic question that you can ask. If you haven't been successful in identifying someone's DISC, there's a question that you can ask that will make it super simple. Some of the other topics that you discussed, I wish we had more time. I actually cover all of those topics in my full course. So I will do the best I can to get to as much of those as I can today during our time. So what you see on the screen now is just a general overview. We have DIS and C. They each stand for something different. We'll go into that. But what I want you to notice here are that there are some similarities in a combination of the styles. For example, the D style and the I style both tend to be more active and more open. And when I say more open, what I mean by that is more open to new ideas, new ways of thinking. They're more open to people in general. So those are two common things that are shared by both the D and the I style. The I and the S style both share in common that they are both people-oriented. The I style tends to be more people-oriented with anybody who breathes, versus the S style is people-oriented in a different way. They tend to be more comfortable with people they already know, like, and trust. But they both get energy from being around other people. The S and the C style tend to be more passive and guarded. So they're not going to be as outgoing. They're going to be a little bit more private. They're going to be a little bit more difficult to read than the D and the I styles. And then the D and the C style both tend to be more task oriented. Like they like to get stuff done. Now, they might go about it differently, but they both have the common goal of accomplishing tasks. And so when we're talking about DISC, what I want you to understand is that everybody is a blend of all four of these. Like we all have different characteristics to some degree that are going to show up, especially in varying aspects of our life. So we're a blend of all of these. And oftentimes you will see, if you were to take the assessment, which many of you I know have, and some of you haven't, but the stronger you lead with one or two, the more common those behavioral styles or those characteristics are going to show up in your life. But just know there is no right or wrong way to be naturally wired. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. And if you can accept and acknowledge that you might be wired differently than other people, you are going to be a much happier person. And I will help share with you today how you can use that knowledge to better communicate, better connect with, better manage, better lead, better sell to people who are different than you. All right, we're going to start with the D behavioral style. So the D stands for dominance. Personally, I don't really like the word dominance. To me, it has kind of a negative connotation, and yet it is what it is. So I choose not to assign a negative meaning to that word and just go with it. So we'll go through a few of the different descriptors that will help you identify people who lead with their D. So as we go throughout this presentation, pay attention to the characteristics that I'm talking about and think about if I were talking to someone on the phone, because that's a lot of what we're doing right now is we're on lockdown. If I were talking to someone on the phone, which of these characteristics might I find or might I not find in my conversation? And these are the types of things that will help you to identify their behavioral style, even if you're not able to see them in person or to interact with them in person. So the D style. The D style tends to be direct. Like they don't beat around the bush. Now they can also get a bad rap because sometimes other people perceive them as being rude or abrupt. And we're going to talk about reality versus perception for every behavioral style. But they tend to go after what they want. They tend to be more direct. They also tend to be more decisive. And so by this, I mean, they don't need a whole bunch of information in order to make a decision. Now, sometimes if you use any of these behaviors to the extreme, I like to say anything to the extreme can be unhealthy. So being decisive is awesome until it's not awesome anymore. So one of my goals is for you to be aware of how any of these descriptors resonate with you so you can create a greater self-awareness about how you're naturally wired brings you value and how it might hold you back. People who lead with their D tend to be competitive. Now, typically when I teach in person, I say, what types of things are people who lead with their D competitive with? And inevitably, a high D will shout out and say, everything, which is true. They tend to be more competitive. And if they don't have something to compete against someone else, oftentimes I will find that the higher D behavioral style will set an internal competition for themselves. They tend to thrive in an environment where there is a competition. People who lead with their D also tend to be impatient. Now, this can relate to a variety of things. For me, for example, I lead with my D pretty high, and other people's pace is where my impatience comes out really strong. I have a high degree of patience with people in general, especially if I am in relationship with them, but the pace in which people function tends to be a struggle for me because I am very fast-paced and I like for others to keep up with me. So my awareness around this has enabled me to understand that sometimes I need to just slow the heck down and have a realistic expectation of someone who is wired differently than I am. So fast pace. The higher your D is, the more fast pace you will likely be in more areas of your life. For example, I tend to walk fast. I tend to talk fast, not when I'm presenting, because I adapt my presentation to slow myself down, because I'm aware that if I talk too fast in a presentation, I'm going to lose people. But I tend to talk fast, I tend to walk fast, and I also tend to think fast. So again, this D behavioral style tends to be more active. That can be physically as well as mentally, thinking very quickly. And there's some drawbacks to that as well, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. People who lead with their D tend to be bigger risk takers. Now, once again, this can be awesome. You can take a big risk that has the potential to have a huge payoff. And if that works in your favor, that's going to be amazing. Well, the reverse is also true. They might take a risk and it might have a huge negative impact. The simple reality is people who lead with their D are more likely and more willing to take those big risks without the security and assurance of a high degree of payoff. Their opposite behavioral style, which is the S, is going to think much differently. They are going to want a high degree of security before they take a risk. One is not better than the other. They're just different. And being, thinking, and acting different is okay. So here's where I want to talk about your reality versus their perception. So for any of you who already know your behavioral style and you have a high degree of D in you, I want you to think about what your reality is of who you are versus what other people may perceive you to be. Now, perception and perspective are two of my favorite words. And what I've learned is I have a very specific perception and perspective, and that is created based on my own personal experience. Now, nobody else's experience is the same as mine, and therefore, many people likely have a much different perspective or perception than I do. And this can be, I teach a class called The Art of Asking Powerful Questions. And in that class, I share how to make sure that your perception and perspective are aligned with whoever you are speaking to. So here I want to create a little bit more of awareness. If you lead with your D, your reality might be that you see yourself as confident, whereas other people's perception of that confidence could potentially be seen as egotistical, especially when used to the extreme. Your perception may be, or your reality may be, that you are simply direct, like you don't beat around the bush, no problem, right? Well, other people may see you as being abrasive. So I encourage you, for those of you who lead with your D, you can be direct and deliver that directness without being abrasive. Just be aware that what you intend for people to perceive may not be their perception of your reality. Assertive. Assertiveness is awesome. It helps us to accomplish things. Other people's perception of this may mean that you are too aggressive, and that could potentially push them away. So once again, you can be assertive without making people feel like you're being too aggressive or too pushy. Focused. This is an interesting one, and I have observed this in my office specifically with one particular person who leads with their D. I think they lead with their D at like 150%, if that's even possible. But here's the reality. They are super focused, but other people see that person as potentially being rude because there's not much emotion. There's not much awareness outside of what they're attempting to accomplish at that time. They're just super focused. Their goal is to accomplish their goal for the day. And other people look at that as they don't ever have time for anyone else but themselves because they're always trying to accomplish their goal. Whereas they see it as simply, I'm just focusing, don't interrupt me, I have something to accomplish. And then determined.
Can I just jump in for a second there?
Absolutely.
I just wanted to share an example of that that I learned the hard way. I'm 99% D. I'm very focused. I walk in, I know exactly what I want to do today. And at my old company, my broker had to walk up to me one day and say, Christy, why are you so rude to everyone? And I'm like, I'm not rude for anyone. I have time for everyone. And she said, when you walk in the morning, you don't say good morning to everybody. You need to walk around the office and say hello to everybody before you start your day. And I started doing that, and my relationships completely changed. And it was just an awareness issue. So I love that you're giving us both sides of this.
Yeah, that is a perfect example. So I'll give you an extra little tip. Whenever someone says something like that to you, where you feel like you have to defend your position, like, oh no, I'm not that, I would encourage you to respond, not just you, Christy, but everyone. I would encourage you to respond with this question. What is it that causes you to say that? Because then you're living in curiosity and you're opening it up to understand what they're truly meaning by saying you don't have time for anyone. And that facilitates a much higher degree, a much higher level of communication, which can be life-changing. I love that example. That's perfect. Determined. People who lead with their D, their reality might be, I just am super determined, whereas other people can see them as strong-willed. So just be aware. If you lead with your D, we can oftentimes get a bad rap. You can be confident in all of these attributes. Just be aware that other people may perceive you differently than you intend to be perceived. All right, the I behavioral style. Now you can go online and you can ask the question, what does I stand for in DISC? And you'll probably get multiple different answers. The words that I've chosen are the most common words, but just know that you might look out there and you might find the word inspiring instead of influence. One's not right or wrong. They both accurately describe DISC, but influence is the most common word. People who lead with their I tend to, especially if they're self-aware of how they're naturally wired is valuable, they tend to be able to influence people more effectively. So the I style. This is one of my favorite things to help people understand. So I also lead with my I at a pretty high level, 100%. And so people who lead with their I, especially the higher I's, we tend to do what I call verbal processing. And what this means is that we think with our mouths. So imagine that as a high I, you're having a conversation with someone, let's say maybe the opposite person of you, which would be someone who is wired with their C. And we're talking, and that person who leads with their C is thinking in their head, can you just get to the point already? Because they wouldn't verbalize it. They would only think that in their head. But let's just say they did verbalize it. And they said to the high I, could you just get to the point? The high I's response would be something like, I'm not sure what the point is yet, because we think through things by talking through them. This is a huge aha, especially for clients of mine who have a significant other who leads with their C and they lead with their I. It helps them to understand that that is how they think. So if you have a high I in your life, especially if you do not lead with your I, their goal is likely not to just talk for the sake of talking. It is simply how we process. Sometimes when having a conversation with someone, just in me talking, I can come to some realizations, even without their response. Super, super important for you to remember. Expressive. People who lead with their I tend to be more expressive in pretty much all things, in what they wear. You know, for girls, oftentimes you can identify behavioral style by watching and looking at what someone is wearing. Now, none of this is a hard and fast rule. What I'm sharing with you today are tendencies and how we can expect people to likely behave. But as an identifier, someone who is dressed in bright, fashy, fashionable clothing with big earrings and matching shoes and an amazing belt, chances are they probably have a high degree of I in them because they are very expressive. We use our facial expressions at a higher degree. You know, Christy commented on my smile. I like to smile. I'm very expressive. And not only am I expressive when I'm happy, but people who lead with their I also tend to be more expressive when they're sad or when they're angry. And to a degree, we just can't disguise our emotions nearly as effectively as our counterpart, people who lead with their C. Our voice inflection is also another thing where we tend to be more expressive. So in identifying behavioral style over the phone, listen for their tonality. Do they talk with excitement, or are they more monotone and more quiet? That can be a great indicator of their behavioral style. People who lead with their I tend to be more optimistic. We tend to naturally look through life with the lens of the glass being half full. Now, this to the extreme can also be detrimental, but generally, we are looking at best case outcomes versus, well, the what ifs of the more pessimistic mindset, which we will talk about in just a minute. We tend to be more emotional. Now, when I'm teaching in person, I usually say, when I say the word emotional, what comes to mind? And this is what I usually get: sad, crying, mopey. Well, none of those are positive emotions. And so I'm not exclusively saying people who lead with their I tend to be more mopey and sad. What I mean is they tend to be more emotional with all of their emotions. We feel our feelings more intensely and more passionately, and we also share them more openly. So when we are happy, you're going to know we're happy. And if we're having a bad day, for a lot of us, it's really hard, especially if authenticity is one of your core values, which it is mine. It can be really difficult for me to disguise when I'm having a bad day. And because I'm aware of this, if I'm having a particularly rough day, I realize that my energy will be attracted by other people. And if I am having a bad day, oftentimes I will just stay away because I don't want to have a negative impact on other people. So that's what I mean when I say people who lead with their I tend to be more emotional. We feel our feelings very intensely. We are feelers more so than we are thinkers. Collaborative. People who lead with their I love to work with other people. This goes back to being active, to being people-oriented, as well as the verbal processors. I can accomplish more by working together with someone else than I can by myself, hands down. And because I am aware of that, if I need to brainstorm something, I will make it a point to reach out to someone to help me with that, because I know that that verbal processing is going to bring out in me something that for someone who is opposite, that leads with their C, sitting quietly without people distracting them is going to help them think better. One is not right, one is not wrong. They're both different, and different is okay. So your reality, for those of you who lead with your I, think about this. You may see yourself as being spontaneous, which can be awesome. I love being spontaneous. While other people could potentially see that as being impulsive, not thinking through before you make a decision. Optimistic. I tend to be very optimistic, and this can also be perceived by others as being unrealistic. And I've had to take a really good look at myself because I can be very unrealistic with my high level of optimism, and this has brought some significant drawbacks in my own life. Talkative. We like to talk. Oftentimes, people who lead with their I, their favorite thing to talk about is themselves. I will encourage you to be self-aware around that and don't be a conversation hog. Other people may see that as being self-promoting. Again, self-awareness here is key. We tend to be more expressive. We talked about that one already. Other people may see that as being a little more dramatic, maybe not quite so necessary, especially these realities versus their perception. This is especially true when interacting with people who are the opposite of us. So the opposite of the I is the C, the opposite of the D is the S, and vice versa. The opposite of the S is the D, especially when you're interacting with people who are opposite. This is vitally important. We also tend to be more trusting because we are more optimistic. We tend to trust people simply because we like them. This can be seen as being gullible, and I personally have experienced this as well. So I have to sometimes put those types of thoughts into check and say, am I being too trusting, or are there valid reasons for me to be able to trust right now? All right, the S behavioral style, steadiness. There's lots of S words that describe the S behavioral style. Steady, stable, supportive. So we'll go through a few of those now. So for people who have a higher S, these are the people that tend to be more accommodating. Now, to the extreme, this can be unhealthy. If you are over accommodating, you may be putting others above yourself to your own detriment. So for those of you who have a high degree of S, I encourage you to remember that nobody can take advantage of you without your permission. We teach people how to treat us, all of the behavioral styles, but that accommodating other people can come in very beneficial in many regards. Just don't let it get to the extreme to where you are doing yourself a disservice. Much like the high I, people who lead with their S are friendly. Now, again, these are going to be the people who they want to go out to lunch. They want to gather with a small group of people. They don't necessarily, unless their second leading behavioral style is an I, and then that might be a little bit different, but they don't necessarily want to go out to a cocktail party where they don't know anyone, or to a spouse's Christmas party where they don't know anyone. So it's not just any people that they want to hang out with, it's the people that they know, like, and trust. And they tend to be very friendly, very respectful of other people. They also tend to be more patient. Now, inside, they may be complaining and get frustrated with other people, but that's not something that you are likely going to see. When they do become impatient, they're going to hold that in, and they tend to be a little more difficult to read with what's going on inside them. They also tend to be reliable. In the mind of someone who leads with their S, if they say they're going to do something, they're going to do it. Now, the opposite, the person who leads with their D, when they commit to doing something, it's not necessarily that they commit to that thinking, oh, I know I'm not going to do that. They probably have every intention of following through with what they've said they're going to do, but for various reasons, that commitment may not remain the highest priority. Something else might come up that's more time pressing. Something might come up that's more exciting for them. But people who lead with their S, they have that general steady, stable, I said I'm going to do it, and so I am going to follow through. So they tend to be more reliable. They are also a team player. Now, a little bit different here than people who lead with their I. Yes, they like being a team player because there are people and they like interacting with people, but oftentimes their goal is to play a more supportive role within that team. They like to make sure that they are assisting whoever they are in business with or in relationship with, that they are giving them whatever they need to be successful. People who lead with their S, especially if they also have a high degree of C in them, they do not like to be in the limelight. They prefer to kind of just lay low, fly under the radar. Oftentimes, they are going to take satisfaction in knowing that they've contributed to someone else's success. And yes, they would love to be recognized by that individual person, but it usually makes them more uncomfortable for a lot of attention to be on them. So they love helping people that they are in relationship with to accomplish their goals. If you lead with your S, your reality might be that you are very thorough, and I'm sure you likely are. And to some people, that may be seen as indecisive. Making decisions can be really difficult for people who lead with their S, because they want to make sure that they're making the best decision for everyone involved. So again, these are the opposite behavioral style of the D, and we already discussed that people who lead with their D tend to make decisions very quickly and more decisively. The opposite tends to be true for those who lead with their S. You may see yourself as being patient, and other people may perceive you as being timid. Oftentimes, because they don't like the focus to be on them, they're more resistant to raising their hand, asking questions. It's one of the reasons why Christy and I talked about encouraging you to use the chat box. People who lead with their S and their C are much more likely to use the chat box than people who lead with their D and their I, because the people who lead with their D and their I are just going to raise their hand, interrupt, and ask questions. But I want everyone to feel comfortable. So if you lead with your S and you have a question or a comment, drop it in the chat box. Tolerant. You might be able to more readily tolerate many different circumstances. Other people may see you as being passive aggressive. I would encourage you, for those of you who lead with your S, if you say yes, make it your yes. Don't say yes to something that you would really rather say no to, because you may harbor resentment, even if it's privately. Let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Don't make your decisions based on what you think other people are going to think of you. Sensitive. People who lead with their S tend to be a little more sensitive and read things into the picture. Why did they speak to me that way? Why did their email come across so harsh? What did I do? They tend to self-reflect and think that it has to do with them. And so I'm going to be bold with care and concern and share with you, for those of you who lead with your S, it isn't all about you. So if your feelings are hurt, just be aware that it might have nothing at all to do with you, and it might have everything to do with the person who you're feeling offended by or more sensitive towards. Other people may see you as being too easily offended. Again, the word accommodating. You may think, oh, I'm being accommodating, I'm making everything work for everyone else, where other people may perceive you as being submissive, like you're not going to stand up for what you want, you're just going to do what everyone else around you wants you to do. All right, the C behavioral, compliance, and another word that is also very common for the C is conscientious. I chose compliance because I can spell it easier than I can spell conscientious. So for those of you who lead with your C, you tend to be more compliant. People who lead with their C like to do things the way they are supposed to be done. And if there is not a clearly defined way that things are supposed to be done, then the right way is their way. They also tend to be more organized, and we will see this in many areas. I like to say the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And oftentimes, the higher your C is, the more areas of your life you would expect to see organization. In your car, at your desk, in your Dropbox, maybe even in your wallet. Now, remember, people who lead with their C are opposite of those who lead with their I. And so here's what I want everyone else who doesn't lead with their C to understand. People who lead with their C are naturally wired. It's not something they wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to see what a Debbie Downer I can be today. They're naturally wired to look through life more through the glass as half empty. Now, people who lead with their C don't like this word because it has a negative connotation. And so oftentimes I hear them say, I'm not pessimistic, I'm realistic. And I would agree with that. That is true. The great thing about the high C's perspective, being more glasses half empty, is that they are more likely to look at all of the potential outcomes versus those of us who lead with our I. We get excited about a decision. We're like, woo woo, let's go. And we don't even slow down long enough to take into consideration that the outcome that we're looking for might not even be the likely outcome. There could be multiple different outcomes, some of which might not be too positive. So the high I and the high C can balance each other well when there is an awareness around how awesome it is that you are wired differently. Conservative. I'm not talking politics here. When I say conservative, people who lead with their C tend to do more conservative things, like, for example, in typing an email or the language that they use. They may use less jargon, and they may use more traditional and appropriate words and grammar. When they type an email or write a note, they are more likely to follow the structure in which they were taught in school, versus someone who leads with their I is just going to be expressive and do it, however they want. The people who lead with their C, they tend to dress more conservatively. They tend to act more conservatively. So in general, the higher that C is, the more conservative they tend to act. Analytical. So these are the analytical minds who are always thinking about all of the different potential options, opportunities, and how things work and why they work the way they do. Now, if you lead with your C, your reality may be that you are simply being precise. Other people may look at that as being perfectionistic. We talk about how paralysis by analysis. Sometimes people who lead with their C spend so much time making it perfect that they overlook what they could learn by just doing it, screwing up, and learning from that. This is one that I'm passionate about. People who lead with their C tend to be more quiet. There is nothing wrong with being quiet. Yet our society puts this negative stigma on people who are more quiet. Like, introvert is a dirty word in our society. Introvert is not a dirty word. These are so valuable. The people who are quiet are so valuable, and yet our society puts a high emphasis and a more positive note on those of us who have the good personality, the effervescent, optimistic, outgoing, the people that are people. That, in my opinion, is not true. We are both equally valuable, and I think people who lead with their C and who tend to be more quiet get a bad rap. Other people may see you as being antisocial. So here's where I want to say, for those of you who do not lead with your C and do not understand quiet people, just because they don't talk or interact as much as you do does not make them antisocial. It simply makes them different, and different is okay. Here we have the word again. You may perceive yourself as being more realistic. Others may see you as being pessimistic. So here is a self-awareness opportunity for those of you who lead with your C. If you are showing up as the Debbie Downer, or the one who always only sees the worst possible outcome, just do a self-check and say, when you tend to see those things, ask yourself, are there any potential additional outcomes that I could bring to the table that aren't necessarily so doom and gloom? Compliant. You may think yourself as just a-okay because you tend to be more compliant. Other people may see you as legalistic. People who lead with their C tend to see things in more black and white. They tend to allow their emotions not to influence their decisions or their judgment, versus the high I, where we unfortunately sometimes, to a negative degree, allow our emotions to impact our decisions and our judgments. One is not right or wrong. Just be aware of how, when you may do that, it may hold you back. You may see yourself as having high standards. Others may see you as hard to please. This is one of the challenges that I give to my high C students when I'm teaching in person, is be careful of what you expect from other people. It's okay for you to set a really high bar and a really high standard for yourself. Sometimes having that same expectation of other people can be unfair, because not everyone wants to achieve at the high standard that you want to achieve. All right, we've made it through the high level overview. I think we're okay on time. I'm really working hard not to rush through this. So digging deeper and learning more. If after today I haven't answered all of your questions and you want to learn more, I have a couple of different options for you. Right now during this COVID season, I'm doing something that I call Team Dynamics. It's actually a 4-series webinar series of my entire in-person class. I've had lots of teams reach out to me during this COVID and say, hey, can you help us bring our team together, help us to communicate better, help us to understand one another better. The other opportunity I have for you is I offer an amazing DISC certification program. If you want to learn more and become DISC certified, you can go to my website, click on the certification tab, and learn more about that. So let's talk about identifying someone else's style. So here's where I'm going to say, if we're just on the phone, sometimes it's going to be a process of elimination. Now, the most easily identifiable behavioral style is the I, because we're the most expressive. So if you have someone who is not expressive and doesn't speak, quickly with a lot of variation in their tone and talking incessantly, well, if they're not doing that, you can eliminate them as an I. If they are doing that, you can pretty much say, okay, this person probably has a lot of I in there. So for the person who leads with their D, these are going to be the people who want to be efficient. They're probably going to talk fast. They're probably not going to give you as much information as you need because they just want to move on. So you may have to slow down and engage them and ask them really good questions. These are the people who might think and speak in more bullet point fashion. So when communicating back with them, you're going to need to match that to do the same. And I wish we had enough time. I have a whole section on communicating with each style. We simply don't have time to go through that today. But those are the things that you're looking for with the D. Fast-paced, goal-oriented. They want to get stuff done right away. People who lead with their C, again, they tend to have less voice inflection. They also tend to be a little more quiet when they're talking. They will likely give you less information, but the information that they do give you will likely be much more detailed and specific versus just vague and arbitrary answers. The tone of voice is going to be huge when you're talking with people over the phone to help identify or to eliminate behavioral styles. Now, the S style is interesting. It tends to be the most difficult to identify, yet it is one of the most common leading behavioral styles. So if you can't figure out what the heck this person's behavioral style is, you might be able to deduct that they have a high degree of S. So when listening and speaking to these people over the phone, these are going to be the people that care more about the situations. They may speak about the family more than they speak about themselves as an individual. It's difficult to identify an S sometimes. So what I'm going to share with you is that if you're having a conversation with someone and you're like, I am completely stumped, like I have no idea what this person's behavioral style is, here is the magic question that you can ask them. And again, you're going to have the slide on this. The question is, how would your spouse or best friend describe you? And then you're going to give them 4 options. A, direct and to the point. B, social and outgoing. C, steady and dependable. Or D, cautious and perfectly accurate. Now, do you see any correlation with those 4 answers as it relates to everything that I've been speaking about so far? They're all specifically related to the DISC. Direct and to the point is the D, social and outgoing is the I, steady and dependable is the S, and cautious and perfectly accurate is the C. And the best answer you could get back is, well, heck, I don't know, kind of direct and to the point and social and outgoing. Awesome. Now you know the 2 leading behavioral styles. So when I teach this in person, inevitably I have someone raise their hand and they're like, won't they think that's weird if I ask that question? And I'm like, yeah, they will. If you think it's weird, they're going to think it's weird. So how about this? Don't think it's weird. It's not weird. So then the next question I get is, well, what if they ask why I'm asking that question? And I say, I have a great idea. How about you be honest? And here's what that might look like. You know what? The reason I'm asking this question is because it's super important to me that I can deliver the highest level of customer service possible. And this will help me understand how to better interact and communicate with you throughout our entire process. Like, who is going to hear that and be like, yeah, I don't want to work with you. That's just too weird. No one. They're going to be like, dang, nobody else has ever cared enough about me to ask that question. Super, super powerful. So if you're having trouble, use that question to your advantage. All right, here's where the special gift comes in. So I have the opportunity to offer you a free report. It's a really simple, basic report. It's called the Working from Home Report. And TTI, who is the DISC distributor that I'm affiliated with, during the beginning weeks of COVID, they're like, how can we add value to people? So they created this report that will tell you specifically based on your personality style, it will give you tips from working from home. So now that we are 8 or 9 weeks into it, I don't know, Christy always knows exactly how many days into it we are because she makes a different meal every night. Like maybe week 53 or something. Day 53, not week 50, God forbid.
It depends what state you're in.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, that's right. But it's a great free report. So Christy is also going to drop the link and where you can go to take this. You will take an assessment. It will not give you your graph. Like, it won't tell you what your behavioral style is, but it will give you tips from working from home. And if taking the DISC assessment is something that you would like to do, I'm offering a special discount on that, and you can reach out to me. It'll be a $25 and you can get your DISC assessment. So reach out to me if you're interested in that. But there is no fee for this, no strings attached. It'll send you a little report that will give you some great working from home tips.
And I just popped in the link and I just popped in Cynthia's email address.
Awesome. So here's where I want to get you into action. I love that you're here today, and I don't want you to just sign up and go about your way and think, oh yeah, that was great. So I'm going to get you into action. For those of you who lead with your D, I'm going to challenge you. For those of you who lead with your S, I'm going to ask you nicely to please do something for me. So here's what I want you to do. It's a 4-step process. I want you to identify, if you don't already know what your style is, based on what you learned here today, identify where do you fall within that. Then I want you to look at someone that you have been in quarantine with. And if you're a single person and you live alone, then go outside the box a little bit, maybe a family member. I want you to identify what you think their behavioral style is based on what you've learned today. And then I want you to take those two and I want you to come up with, how do your behaviors compare to one another? Where do they complement one another? And where do they potentially contradict one another? And then the 4th step is, I would love for you to shoot me an email and share with me what you learned about your relationship with that person. My goal in doing this, I get giddy inside, I get goosebumps or the warm fuzzies, whatever you want to call it. I am passionate about helping other people understand how significantly impactful understanding these simple concepts can be. When you're aware and you introduce these into your relationships, it truly can be life-changing. It has literally changed my life, which is why it is my primary focus now. So I encourage you to get into action. Do it today. Don't wait beyond today. Get into action today. And then I would love to hear from you what you learned through that activity. So before we go to questions and comments, I'm going to leave this screen up while we go to questions. I would love for you to stay connected with me. Again, you're going to get all this information. Email me, Facebook request me. You can text me, call me, or I have a Facebook group. It's a private group called The Inspired Mind. I would love for you to reach out, become part of the group. That's an area where I love to give value back to people and encourage and inspire people. So I'm going to stop my screen share and open it up for questions. And oh shoot, we only have 6 minutes. Okay, well, and I'm free to stay a little bit longer. And if we don't get to your questions, reach out to me. I will always schedule time for you if you want time. You just have to reach out. Okay.
So we have some questions. I'm going to pick out a few of the questions that I think are the most common questions.
Okay.
We have a question on, I think this is a great question for ops bosses who are on the call. The question was from Elizabeth. How do I help high I's learn and retain, because they often seem to have a problem remembering systems and procedures?
Yes, they do. And I actually talk about this specifically in my full course. So here's the thing. You can use this webinar as a great opportunity to share what you've learned with anybody in your life who is annoying you. And I encourage you to share what you've learned versus telling them what you've learned about them. But share what you've learned and how it can help you. So here's the thing with people who lead with their eye. We don't pay attention to things that aren't important to us. And even when we do, we're not likely to remember. So anything you can do to bullet point it and then follow up in an email and then just get in our face and say, listen, I know that you might not remember. So here it is again, here it is again, here it is again. Now, if you get caught up in the mindset of, I shouldn't have to remind an adult, you're right, you shouldn't have to. So you have a choice. You either do what you know needs to be done because of the way they're wired, or you continue to live in frustration.
Love that. Okay, and Grant wants to know on the hiring side, he wanted to ask about hiring people whose natural DISC style does not match the ideal profile for the role. What are your thoughts on that? I have thoughts on that too.
Yep, that is a great question. I still use, when I teach people the hiring process, we have some people actually on the call today who I've worked significantly with that on. They've done a great job. I use the DISC as the very first step of the process. I know for those of you who are with Keller Williams, I still believe that the tool that Keller Williams uses is phenomenal. But DISC is an indicator. I wouldn't hire someone based on their DISC any more than I would hire someone based on their resume or their references. It's a package of everything together. It's an indicator, and the first step with that, if it was a mismatch, would be to go through and talk to them and validate it and find out, is their report an accurate reflection of who they are? And then when you're going through the interview process, maybe they're not a good fit based on their skill, based on their mission, their vision, and their values, which DISC does not address. DISC does not measure mission, vision, values. You have to ask good questions to get those answers, and they might be a great match in every other area. And at that point, you have to consider, am I willing to take a chance on them and put them in that position, or is there a different position that might be more appropriate for them? And when I'm hiring, I teach people, don't let red flags become pink. If there is a red flag, talk about it. Someone might not be a match behaviorally and a match every other way. And if you have those conversations right up front about what typically might happen with their behavioral style in this role, talk about it up front, because that way it'll be easier to talk about it if it comes up once you've hired them.
I would add to that, Grant, I would never use a behavioral profile to rule someone out.
Yep.
I would say, like Cynthia just said, it becomes a flag that you want to dig into. So for example, if you're hiring an operations person and you think you want someone who is detail oriented, you're going to be looking for a CS and SC, and they come in with a different behavioral profile, you then want to look, do they have a track record? So for example, I would have been ruled out of an operations position And yet I had a track record 10 years as an operations leader. So that trumped my behavioral profile. The same thing can happen on the sales side. On my team, our #1 producer was a high S, which is not typically what you would see in sales, but he had a track record in furniture sales of 10 years prior to coming to us. So I think you're not necessarily going to rule it out, but it's giving you information that you want to dig into at a deeper level. And the next question that came in was from Carrie about, can you be a different DISC profile at home versus work? And then I can't remember, Megan, I think, commented about maybe you want to touch on natural versus adaptive. And Trish asked about DISC for teens. Is this something we can use for our kids to behavioral profile?
Okay, there's a lot in there. First of all, I'm going to say, unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about natural versus adaptive at a high degree. Basically, the natural style is how you act when there is no environmental influence on you. Your adapted style is how you are currently showing up in your current environment. And if those two are different, there's probably something that's causing you to feel like you need to act differently to succeed in your role. That's as much as I'm going to have time to give there. Happy to go into further discussion.
You guys are going to want to hire her for your team or for your market center, because there's so much more we could do, probably easily multiple hours on this. Mia asked the question that I get all the time, and maybe we'll wind up with this question is, do you have a recommendation for DISC assessments to use for recruits or for your team? Is there a good free version? I know we talked about this the other day.
Yes, I get this question all the time, and I wish I had a better answer. I personally, over the last like 4 weeks, have gone on a mission to find a good free assessment that I can share with people, because I don't like charging people for something if they can get the value they're looking for somewhere else for free. And since Tony Robbins changed their assessment and they don't give us what we want anymore, I have yet to find one. Really, like, not even just a bad one, but really anyone that is good at all. So TTI does have an interviewing version that I like to use. It's a shorter version, and that will be the discounted $25 version that you can get from me. This isn't a sales pitch for me. It's simply to say, hey, I can give you a good price on a good assessment. I personally am not aware of one that I can direct you. My lender just reached out to me this morning. Hey, I have an agent in Idaho Falls. Can you give him a direct? I'm like, I wish I could, and I can't. So
I would say also, just by the way, those of you who used to use the free Tony Robbins, you get what you pay for. So those of you who are my coaching clients or who are my coaches on this call, you all know that I'm really 99% D, and you could probably see that at the beginning of the call. And the Tony Robbins assessment has me as an SC, and my S and my C are like 18%. They're very, very low. So I'd say you get what you pay for. And if you need to use a DISC, hook up with Cynthia. I'm not trying to sell her either. I just think you get what you pay for. So if you're hiring, you want accurate information. And I posted her email in here. I will be sending out the recording along with the presentation, along with her contact information. You guys have the link to get your work from home report in there. And you all think, I didn't see any emoticons. Do you guys have your emojis at the bottom that you can give us a little reaction? There we go. Elizabeth's got it. Let's give a round of applause to our high eye. Thank you so much, Cynthia. That was really invaluable. I think during this time of COVID especially, our operations people have a really unique opportunity to connect one-on-one with the people on their teams. Absolutely. And also we're doing so many virtual events, we're doing so many phone calls with people that we really have to be aware of how we can connect at a deep level, and DISC is such an invaluable tool. So thank you for giving us your time today. It was really awesome, and thank you guys for joining us on the call, and we'll see you next time. Have a great week, everybody.
Thanks, Christy.